All right, we'll get started. Thank you all for attending this meeting, this panel. I know this is kind of last day and one of the last panels here, so we'll try to make it a bit more interactive and a bit more casual, so have a bit more open discussion. But really, this panel is about VR. It's one of the hot topics these days around what is VR and augmented reality, and we're here certainly to talk about what is VR and what does it mean and how do you make it personal, but also video is a big part of that, and we wanted to really dive into that. And so I've got three great panelists here who are going to give us a view into that, and then we have a few questions that I'll start off with, and I'll get them to start having some discussion around this. Before I do that, I'll introduce myself. So Mano Kulasingam, I'm SVP of Products and Solution at Accedo. We're one of the companies that are very much into VR these days as well, and we're excited for this new technology to kick off and move into mainstream. With that, I'll pass it to Malachi. I want to make sure I get that right. Malachi here, and please introduce yourself.
Great. Malachi Bierstein with Nokia Technologies. You may be familiar with the Ozo branded not only camera but associated software technologies that are really out there innovating and providing tools for not just content creators but also for the technology backend to deliver, and then the front end to create these amazing immersive VR experiences. So the Ozo group, which is really the digital media division inside of Nokia Technologies, is focusing on those technology components that allow for creation and delivery and then playback of these experiences. So we're not doing services, we're not aggregating things. We're really trying to provide tools to creators as well as the technology infrastructure providers to make it easier to distribute as well as enjoy, because in order to make it personal, you have to be able to access it and consume it, and that's definitely a big challenge that we see in the market today, but look forward to exploring some conversations with my panelists.
Hi, I'm Christian Egeler. I head up all AR and VR product development at Verizon Labs. Inside of Verizon Labs, we're looking very horizontally at how AR and VR can enhance our businesses. Today I'm probably going to be more focused, obviously on the media and interactive entertainment side, talking about how the platform that we've been building called envrmnt can be used to basically be able to stream AR and VR content, and how we're giving people some tools to more easily then be able to create that content and get more proliferation out in the field with it. Generally speaking, our focus is to enhance AR, VR content delivery, and then we generally look at what's required, not only over the top but on the network side. We look at how we can tie AR and VR into our 5G network strategy, and generally speaking, just look at it as next major generation of different content.
Hello everybody, my name is Iddo. I work for Kaltura. It's an online video platform. I'm part of the product team there. Kaltura, I work specifically for the media part of Kaltura, and we work with content providers, service providers that want to mostly monetize their content, either by offering it with advertising or as part of SVOD or a TVOD solution. Kaltura also has a separate business unit completely focused on education and enterprise, where we service some of the biggest universities in the world, as well as some of the biggest enterprises in the world. And we really believe that there is a layer to video streaming and video management that is actually shared by all these types of organizations, and we feel that VR is actually a big part of that, and we see VR as kind of a strategic roadmap item for us that could actually be developed for the entire company and the entire customer base. So this is what we're doing today. We're working closely with our customers across media, education, enterprise to understand how they want to use VR and eventually AR. And we're finding or developing the tools to make sure they can manage this content and interact or allow their users to interact with it.
Great, thanks. I mean, gentlemen, VR has been, the buzzword, and there's a lot of big companies that are putting a lot of investment behind it. What do you think, the characteristics of VR today, especially for media, and over the past years, what do you think the VR maturity has come, and where do you think we're going? Malachi, do you want to start off?
Yeah, sure. Definitely, what is VR is a question that if you asked, everybody in this audience, they'd probably give you a different response. I think that's one of the challenges that we have, right, as an industry, and also if you're a consumer, well, what is VR, and what is the first experience that you touch, and if you think like, let's say at the lowest level, kind of the magic window 360 where you're moving your phone or your mouse pad around and actually looking at the 360 content, is that really VR? Yes, it is, but is that the limitation? Is that the end game? If consumers think that, then yes, you could look at it and say, wow, we're definitely not mature at all in the market, because that's just the kind of minimum viable product. But when you start looking at proper immersive experiences where you're putting a headset on and actually feeling like you are there in the experience, whether it's live streamed or something that had been pre-recorded, that's really more so how we consider, at least at Nokia, what proper VR is. It needs to have depth, it needs to have stereo audio and stereo surround sound, needs to be kind of 4K or better from a quality standpoint. So we definitely have our own bar of what we think it is, but it's certainly not, I think, mature as far as even a terminology standpoint of what it is. And where is it going? Certainly, having just proper VR experiences where, again, they're either live streamed or they're, quote unquote, VOD or offline. Moving forward into the mixed reality, I think that's a big subject here that we believe is the real future. VR alone is not going to last, but with AR and MR kind of taking off, where you have interactive experiences on top of live action VR, that's where you start to get, I think, very interesting. And if those types of experiences are the first thing that consumers feel and that are introduced as VR, I think there's going to be a lot more traction and growth in the market there.
Christian?
Yeah, so I generally agree with Malachi. There's this issue with the VR terminology. What exactly is VR? Generally speaking, I've enjoyed those moments when people have come to me and said, just give me the VR, and then I'm just like, what are you specifically talking about?
Right.
And having said that, and I'm kind of in this space, where Verizon has a large retail chain, so by saying it's immature, I'm by no means telling you not to not purchase a existing headset accessory by any stretch of the imagination, but we just have to realize that we're in a very early space in this industry. Generally speaking, you on one side you have mobile headsets that generally you may not say doesn't give you an immersive experience, isn't powerful enough, or you have higher end stuff like the Vive or the Oculus where you're like, hey, this is pretty cool, but maybe now we don't have the right content for it, to keep me in it, keep me coming back, and then man, I have all these wires, and you generally want to disengage the wires. Now there are things that are already starting to happen where where those problems are being overcome, and then generally speaking, at the same time you have AR slamming into VR now, getting a lot more, voice traction, media traction, and then as Malachi was saying, now these paths start to converge into MR. Now, from a futuristic standpoint, we probably have to we have to start thinking about how people have to. What they specifically at a minimum viable product level really need in a VR experience, whether it's still improvements in the visual quality, improvements in the content, improvements in the audio experience, improvements in the haptics and the touch part of it. And all of those things are happening. Probably is still going to take some time to get all the kinks worked out. And then more importantly, that's important because at the same time we can work out any network and content delivery problems for VR, and then when it's all hashed out, then have a great, fully immersive next generation platform.
Yeah, I mean, I think all good points. I think it's key when you talk to people to understand if they experience a mobile VR experience or a PC VR experience, because those can be very, very different. And so, like you said, what they experience as VR could be totally different things, and even in terms of not only what they watch, but how comfortable they were when they watched it, right? I mean, how can they really see themselves going through such an experience for a long stretch of time, which we're all in the video space, we're all measuring video sessions, right? We want people to really be immersed in this experience for a long time. And so that's a challenge still. And I think from our customers' perspective, they're still trying to figure out what is the right content for VR. And VR today to produce is quite expensive, and so they want their best return on investment for that. And they also want to understand what would people would like to come back to. I mean, they don't want to produce one video that maybe will get them noticed at I don't know, at an upfront or something like that, but users will never come back to. So they want to create some sort of a viable business from VR. And I think that's what we're kind of seeing today in bits of pieces. And I have my thoughts about what I think could be the most interesting content for VR. And I also hear that VR is being compared to 3D 3, 4, 5 years ago, and I think in that sense, if you look at content, you can really understand why VR, I think, is going to be different, because you can really imagine sort of specific experiences, specific types of content that you would really want to consume only in VR or mostly in VR, and I don't think we had that with 3D. So I think looking at content and trying to figure out what is the right content for VR is a really important question for us.
Well, some great points here, but I think with VR, with a lot of investments going towards it, when do you guys think when it's going to take into more of a mainstream? Like how far are we away, and what are some of the barriers to get us there? Especially with video, now if you're streaming 4K video, you're going to have 2 4K stream that's going to the headset to be able to do that. So what are some of the things that you think that are barriers for us, and are we going to get to a mainstream in a couple of years, or is that 5 years ahead?
Yeah, and I'll jump in and try to explain from our perspective. But I think even just from 2 of the companies here, for sure, on the 5G and kind of mobile delivery, which a lot of it is being delivered through mobile today, I'm not worried about that. It is going to get solved. I mean, we're in the process of already solving it, and how do you get bits through a pipe? Certainly you can increase obviously the size of the pipe. You can manipulate through different adaptive bitrate techniques. And there's a lot of different things. There's enough emphasis on that. I feel like the maturity and the kind of mass market use case has not emerged, right? I think that's really still the biggest issue with VR, AR, MR, whatever it may be. Could it happen this year? Yeah, it could happen this year. Someone's got to come up with that. It's a content creation. It's whether you're a content creator solely, or you're a content creator that's maybe putting in some computer elements, et cetera, but the content has to be engaging enough and then go viral to create this mass movement. So there's definitely a slow adoption that's happening, a slow and steady adoption that certainly Daydream and Gear VR is definitely putting mobile in your hands. I think as that expands, with different mobile options, it's going to become more and more. But it is a different spirit, and it's, as Christian mentioned, right, on a PC versus a mobile headset. You can't get as high a quality on a mobile device. Even though you do feel fully immersed, it is a different level of experience. So how do you get people out of their living rooms where PSVR and the Vive and Rift and others are creating this interaction and this adoption, but it's certainly not mass market yet. That experience, so it comes down to what is that content, whether it's live action VR combined with some CGI that's a game, or it's just this live experience, whether it's a concert or a sports event that maybe pulls people fully out. I feel like that's what needs to happen to really make it mainstream. And I think we're still you're probably in that 12 to 18 months where it's gonna happen.
Do you guys want to add it?
Yeah, no problem. So I generally am thinking that VR is going to probably take another 12 or 18 more months to kind of percolate with that killer use case. I generally sometimes think, though, that to get more mainstream attraction, you have to tie the use case for the platform to things that people are already spending money on, things that they're already doing. So one of the things that I can describe is that In the city today, there's also TechCrunch Disrupt this week, and so over at TechCrunch Disrupt, we have a demo where we're basically showing someone playing a VR interactive experience where it's real time and people can engage with each other, and that in itself is cool because if you think about MMO multiplayer games today, that's something that people already do. Now, I think there's generally an ability that if we think of doing it in VR, there's some attraction to that. And then on the flip side, as part of that same demo, we're also showing how AR can be used as a catalyst to then be able to stream that session, similar to what's being done in esports, where people are watching people play games. So I think when you think about that, we have to tie what we want to do with VR and AR to things that people are doing today, and just saying, how can I make it better? How can I make it more immersive? Rather than maybe just creating a completely new use case for it, which will happen, but it will take time to do that. And so the way I generally see things is I generally see, VR was hot last year. VR is going to kind of mature, rethink itself, re-strategize this year. We'll see AR kind of, take off, and then I think that, next year, and I mean, I could be wrong. I'm a futurist. I would love new stuff to happen as soon as possible. But then we come next year and we start to see these two things come together. And I think this year a lot of people are also going to, not only from the cool technology standpoint, from the business and productization, commercialization standpoint, really dig into how can I really monetize this, and what are the specific and practical business use cases that will get people to use the technology.
Yeah, I'll risk being a little bit more pessimistic and maybe controversial. I think it's going to take 5 to 10 years for VR to become truly mainstream. I just read an interview with Paul Malachi, former Oculus and Facebook, who said that it's going to take about 10 years for mobile to become as good as tethered VR and PC VR, and I think he's probably one of the best people to make that assumption. And I think before VR is really good on mobile, it's not going to be truly mainstream. Yes, maybe we're going to hold on to, especially the people in this room, we're going to hold on to their goggles and put it on every now and then when they see that the New York Times uploaded like a cool VR experience, but it's not really, I don't consider that to be mainstream personally. But I think at the point in time when mobile will be very, very cool, then people, yes, will come back to it again and again. But I think it's actually going to take even longer than that for us to feel like VR is like going to the movies. It's like something that is truly a unique experience that is as good as I think some of us imagine that it could be. And that's only going to happen when VR is going to be as close to human vision as possible. And that's based on the research that I read is about 20 years away. So we still, I think, have a very long way to go to get to those places. Having said that, so you don't just all leave the room immediately, I think you should keep in mind how we watched online video just 15 years ago, right? When YouTube or other websites just launched, it was very low bit rate, but we still watched it because it was still interesting. It still had some sort of experience that we couldn't get anywhere else. And I think that's what we're going to see in the next 5 to 10 years. There are going to be those experiences that are going to be worth it to us. It's not going to be the holodeck on Star Trek, but we're going to see how we can get there. And it's going to be interesting enough for people to kind of go back to VR and interact with it.
No, I think it's a good point, and I think Malachi, you touched on as well around the mixed reality, right? And I think that's where you no longer need a headset to really experience the VR and the AR experiences. But I think when we look at it, we talk about some of the barriers to getting to mainstream is obviously content, and then also the hardware to really catch up to that. But it is a chicken and egg problem, right? Because you need content for people to adopt, and then the technology will advance as there's more demand. Do you think that with companies like Facebook, Google, putting a lot of efforts towards this, that the hardware will accelerate, and then do you think content will be much cheaper to produce as well? Because with Nokia Ozo, you have the camera now, but is that going to be more and more cost effective as we move towards more of a mainstream approach?
Well, you pay for what you get to some extent, and we try to make, and what we're doing, we try to make it very simple to do it, and there's a lot of components to making and creating VR, AR, MR content, right? It's not just the hardware, it's not just the post-production software, it's potentially people's time. I mean, there's a lot of different elements that go into it, right? If you're hiring actors, if you're actually, scripting something, is it a live event? How do you get the right camera placement? I mean, there's a lot of different things that go into the cost of a production, whether live or offline, that, can't always be put into, a spreadsheet very easily. Trust me, it's something that we struggle with all the time because we're trying to simplify that. We're trying to look and say, okay, what's the most efficient and cost-effective way to produce content? And there are some very inexpensive ways to produce content out there today. With the consumer 360 VR cameras, yeah, you can create some decent things. Again, back to our question, what is VR? To some people, yeah, that's VR. It's you have a 360 image, it's two-dimensional. Yeah, maybe it doesn't have depth and it doesn't have the best audio quality, but it is an experience that maybe somebody's like, hey, that's cool. That's different than what I'm used to. So there's a lot of different things that are out there. There's a lot of different workflows that are out there to create the content in a cost-effective way. What we're seeing is the people that are trying to do it, in the professional way, in the proper commercial monetizable way, cost isn't really the biggest issue. It's more so, how do I create an experience that I'm going to create engagement, right? I mean, it's like anything, right? People that develop, like when you look at WhatsApp and these different applications, like they're all freemium models. They just want to gain engagement, right? And then all of a sudden they get valued, this crazy amount of value, and they're not making a cent in revenue. So go figure that one out. But that's really what VR and AR and MR needs, right? You need that experience. You need that content that's going to engage. And yeah, I think there already is solutions out there that will fit any kind of cost level. So it just comes down to what's the end product and how does that consumer react to that product, and are they willing to ultimately pay for it? Not today, but down the road.
Yeah. So as far as investment, Google and Facebook are definitely investing a lot of money and resources into it. I mean, generally speaking, they pumped a lot of marketing, a lot of press into it, because last year, Oculus was really promoting VR, and then, now recently, Facebook's been promoting AR a lot. Mm-hmm. And on the AR side, I mean, a lot of recent things caused AR to be so popular. You look at things like Pokemon Go, you look at applications like Snapchat, which are teaching the younger age segments to basically never not use their camera, and then that's a perfect way to then introduce them into then AR content. Going back to specifically the question on VR, basically I think generally speaking, one of the issues today is that the cost to create VR content is so high, but you do have a breadth of tools, kind of from low end to high end. Generally, I would say that all of the tools generally need to improve so that the cost of creating content is easier and and allows people to create more content, good content, and be able to proliferate it. The one thing that I basically see is that you have this camp of you basically have this gamers camp, and then you basically have this traditional Hollywood video camp, and both of them are coming at this from different perspectives, and they both need to collide, and I think in some ways figure out a medium that actually works. You're probably not going to solve creating VR content and editing it today with just Adobe Premiere as it is, even with some improvements. You're not going to figure out how to create interactive VR content with Unity or Unreal. They really need to, with the proper design and implementation behind it, not just kind of hacking or editing, the stuff together. Like figure out how to figure out the workflow for creating the VR content and help make it good, and then also at the same time, hopefully then when that happens, then more people will use it, more people will create more content, and it will also be cheaper to create.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the low-hanging fruit with VR today is live, just because it doesn't require as much planning. There isn't so much storytelling, not to say that it's not interesting, but when you do VOD, VR, and you need to change angles, it's complicated. It's not, it's not straightforward at all. And so there's a lot of thought and planning that goes into it. When you do live, you usually just put the camera in one place, and people are fine with it. It's kind of what they expect. Especially if you're live streaming a basketball match or a music festival like Coachella. I think this is something that people feel very familiar with. Like they know what they're getting. They're happy to get it in that format, and it's also a way for them to get to somewhere they maybe wouldn't be able to get to otherwise. So, I mean, I think I'm a big believer in live VR personally. Another experience that I think kind of connects to it is the whole social experience that, of course, Facebook is pushing very hard on. From Kaltura's perspective, when we power, for example, a lot of online schools, and there's a whole generation now of people that just do online studying, and they never set foot in a class. It's not a myth, it's actually happening. And so imagine if those people that are actually now getting degrees and high school diplomas just by interacting with people over their computer could actually put on their VR goggle and actually interact with people over VR, maybe just for an hour a day. How great that would be for them. How would that upgrade their whole kind of online teaching experience? And I think there is, again, that element of live, which is really exciting, but also the element of social. And I think when those come together in kind of a joint space, the promise of VR really comes together. And I think in that sense, that is a type of content or experience that can happen relatively soon.
Okay. Well, I think that leads to, I guess, with content, how do you monetize? And your traditional OTT or your TV everywhere today, ad or subscription are your default monetization strategies. What do you think with VR? What are some new monetization opportunities that may arise?
Well, I just thought of one when he was talking. When Iddo, when you're mentioning the universities, I'm like, oh yeah, well I'm glad we're partners because there's a bunch of stuff that we're going to work on together. But education, anytime that you can add an additional experience, and again, this is maybe piggybacking. I'm sorry, we're not being controversial. We're just like agreeing with each other here. But when you add on to what Christian was saying on just like, how do you add on to something that is already an existing use case that people are paying for? Well, people are paying for online education and they're getting this 2D experience. Well, what if they could get this immersive 3D experience paying a little bit more? Well, there's a business model there, right? There's money that flows into that where that could justify the investment by the universities to then create these, like there's 2 cameras sitting back here live streaming us. There's just permanent installations of 360 cameras that are live streaming, and maybe they're up close to the professor and they're in certain parts depending on what's happening in the classroom where you truly feel like you're there and you're not really getting a secondary education going online. And then adding an interactive component to that at some point. Now you're talking about, hey, I would pay more for an education online for that, and you don't have to line item it out, right? It's something that can be built into the fee. So that's one that I think is definitely something that we should be exploring immediately. The other one is virtual tickets. I think that's one there's been a little bit of experiments about that already. It's not a new concept, pay-per-view. I mean, it's something that's been around forever, but applying it into the virtual world, definitely something that, I definitely believe in that. Not just for live concerts, but also sporting events. It could be seminars. It could be somebody that wants to be here but can't travel over to New York, and they get to sit here and watch this, this amazing display of conversation that's going on here right now. All of those different things are out there. Aside from the traditional, kind of SVOD, AVOD, you're gonna get there eventually on the traditional media distribution, but I still think that's the opportunity as an industry that we have is to invent some new monetization strategies.
Absolutely. Malachi, I think, and Iddo, I think you hit it. I think education's a great one. Generally speaking, I think doing my chemistry class in VR would be pretty good. Then I don't have to worry about setting things on fire or other bad things happening. Physics, I think definitely would also be a good candidate as well. And then maybe even, I generally think mathematics and of course all the amazing art tools that are starting to come that are already available today. I think you can generally express yourself in VR very well in 3D. I generally think you can learn. I think the education format can be adapted for VR, and I think that can be excellent. There's another one that I think, just besides education for K through 12, college, I think another important one is, and maybe it's a subsection of education depending on how you look at it, is training. Training is like with VR is huge. Whether it's I think in the blue-collared worker space, like VR training is a great way to train people, whether you're a mechanic, you're a retail worker, construction worker, et cetera. VR could give you a much more immersive training experience, make you aware of what you did wrong, what you did right, things you have to look out for. Generally speaking, when you watch the 2D, video training things, you're just like, how do I stay awake, right? Whereas with VR, you generally will be, hopefully if the right content is produced, to be presented with an immersive experience where hypothetically, depending on what happens, it could even trigger an emotional reaction. It could trigger something that it'll trigger things in you that'll help you retain what you're learning in the VR experience. And I think, so education and training are both, I think, great use cases for VR in that respect. And then I think we have to also think about, in the gaming side of content, I mean, people, I think generally speaking, the VR experiences that are being built tend to be shorter in nature, but I think we just need to kind of formalize maybe on the fact that, or accept the fact that, at least for right now, people are taking VR in short doses. So we have to look at how we produce, both film and gaming content in short episodic type of formats. Give them that jolt, and then be ready to then give them that jolt next month or tomorrow or whenever. And that's more of the business model behind it, not how do I figure out how to make a 2-hour cinematic movie that they're going to be able to sit through. I think those things will come, or just naturally come when we get farther along to MR and more advanced headwear. But I generally think like education, training, episodic, both gaming, interactive, traditional film content. That's with VR. That's the way to go.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, just two ideas on how VR can be monetized. I think branded content could be really interesting, because advertisers that pour money into content, they measure it by how much time people actually spend watching the video, and VR, as online video has a very long session time. So, and there's also a lot of places, because you have a 360 view, to plan that logo of the company that you're promoting. So that's also nice. And if you can imagine, a few years ago, you might remember that Red Bull had this guy going. He performed like the highest jump without actually being in space, and they live streamed the whole thing. And imagine how cool it would be to live stream that in VR, or even just to film it in VR, and so people can go back and watch that fall in VR and like see Earth and all that in 360. So I think that's one way of companies, and there's always brands that want to be innovative and pour money into something that is considered to be cool. So I think we'll see a lot of that. And also I think any e-commerce experience that requires to be in a certain space could benefit from it. So imagine if you could choose your next Airbnb by actually looking into the house, or somewhat walking into the house that you might want to rent. And I think that is overall a better experience for that e-commerce experience. And so I think that's another way that this could be monetized fairly quickly.
Okay. I think as we enter into this in the monetization, I think by default we all run into trying to do what we know already, and I think that's one of the things that I find is with VR is that you do have to think outside, and you have to think creative in a way how you monetize, and so the the platforms that we have available today, to how do we monetize on just advertisement, that I think that based on what you guys are saying is it needs to change and rethink how we actually do the monetization strategy. So with that, I think we've got an audience here that certainly I want to open it up to questions, but also, as someone who's new to VR and looking to get into VR and delivering either video VR content, what are some guidelines that you could provide? Where do we start? Where do they get started with VR as a strategy for their content?
Well, I think it depends on where you're coming from, right? If you're a content owner, there's one answer. If you're somebody who's trying to maybe develop applications or some other piece and want to get into the VR ecosystem, maybe there's another answer. So I guess it does depend on where. We touch pretty much all, from content creator, creative type, a director, a producer, all the way to the end consumer, obviously that's consuming it, but like the application developer that's actually creating that experience. So we see a lot of that pieces, and we see, there's a lot of different parts to it all, right? There's the video platform providers that have to deliver it. There's the networks that create, the actual pipes that deliver the content. You have to optimize for that. There's the application developers. There's the creative types. There's post-production houses. I mean, there's a lot of stuff when you try to wrap your head around it. But if we take from the standpoint of a creative or a content owner, and you're just like, hey, I want to have a branded experience to create a deeper connection with my consumers and my customers to my brand, I don't want to think about technology. Trust plenty. All of us up here are thinking about the technology. That's the whole point. We're trying to take it away from the creatives. Don't worry about the process and the technology of creation and delivery, but think about, in a new scope, how do you actually create something that's 360, something that could be interactive in an augmented world? It is a completely new way of thinking. And traditional, somebody who's amazing at traditional 2D film, TV, advertising, content creation may get stuck in 360, because all of a sudden you're like, for instance, we shot Coachella, and you wouldn't even think about this, but we put a camera behind the drummer, and there's all this art installation that's facing forward. Well, guess what? They're not used to putting anything behind it. So it's like there's cables, so during the first show, we actually have to call out and be like, hey guys, it looks horrible, that angle, because you're seeing all this junk behind that nobody thought of before, because you're not used to capturing this 360 image. So all these things from a creative standpoint that are different, and you just learn as you go. But I would say there's enough people out there that are focusing on the technology to really make sure that we get the creatives to really think about creating those experiences in a different way, and that's something that's definitely needed.
Yeah, generally, I guess I'll also speak on the fact that I would suggest looking at where you think you can differentiate with the content and possibly some of the business use cases, because I think, along with the other panels here, we all are building delivery platforms, strong technology platforms, so you don't have to reinvent. How do I get a 360 video delivered to the end consumer? I don't have to build a lot of those pieces of the content delivery workflow or CDN infrastructure, any of those things. The things to really focus on is, how can I use what's out there now creatively outside the box, or what, adjacent things do I actually need to build to be able to serve a use case where there's monetization, where there's revenue. I think that, and having said that, some people are going to be still focused on some technology piece, and that's where I suggest just looking at not necessarily directly butting heads with the guys that are pouring billions of dollars into this kind of go the guerrilla route, figure out what that use case is that maybe isn't being served and doesn't necessarily need that $1 billion of investment to do. And on the content side, as Malachi is saying, people just generally need to practice more on how to be able to film and create this content. I also think that as people look at this, as I said before, they also just need to look at existing industries. They need to look at existing use cases where people are using technologies that are like this, or predecessors, and figure out how we can adapt VR so that they can serve those use cases in a better way.
Yeah, I mean, everything that was said is very true. I don't have much to add. I think if you're going into VR, try to see as much VR as possible, just because we're at a point where some cool experience kind of bubble to the top, but there's also, I feel like, so much that we haven't been exposed to. So I would encourage you to kind of become students of the art, and maybe you could be one of the first experts and really try to see for yourself what makes you, what was a good experience for you, and kind of build on that. I know that's kind of vague, but I think that's always a good place to start. And I think, yeah, always think about an experience that would really benefit from the space. So like, essentially, to me, VR is just putting a person in a different space, and there's a lot of new cool things that you can do with it. But I think the first question you need to ask yourself is there value to be in that space, other than just maybe looking at it from a window, which is essentially what a 2D experience is, right? So I would start with those two questions or tasks, and then build it from there.
And I would add, take some training classes. I mean, there's actually quite a bit that exists out there. If you're not familiar with on the content creation side, I mean, there's a lot of just core camera distributors that are out there that give several hours up to full day or multi-day classes of hey, how to shoot in VR and how to shoot in 360, and how do you actually put yourself in the mind of a creator. Those classes exist, and there's actually more and more that are coming online. I know we're filming a lot of tutorials. So if you went to the resource page on our site, I think we call it Learn Now. We're actually putting a lot of tutorials about how to shoot and how to use the camera, and how, different placement angles and different things. Like if you're a director, how do you think about it? And I know we filmed a couple of quote unquote master class where we've pulled in directors that have used our technology and our camera, and they talk about their experiences and do's and don'ts and things of that nature. So if you're definitely getting in there, I think there's a lot of resources out there to just get educated ahead of jumping into it.
Great. At this point, I want to open it up to the audience for some questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think, Shaim, I believe you said that wireless or mobile VR is behind tether VR.
That mobile VR is generally behind the tethered experience, yes.
So what are the technical issues or hurdles or challenges that it needs to overcome in order to catch up with that VR?
Sure. So I'll start, and I'm sure the technical people will have even better insight than me. But what I see as as a consumer, and also kind of what we're hearing from our customers is, first of all, batteries of mobile devices, they either they run out or they heat. So it's just not as of a.
So why is battery life short? Because of the processing done at the mobile device, or what?
I think it has to do with the processors and also the fact that VR is so intensive, is that it just it runs out. It's a lot of processing power.
So where do you do that processing power cost effectively in order to satisfy technical requirements? For example, what's the best option?
So I'll step in here. I'll make a suggestion on that particular topic. So, as far as why the headsets are hot, I mean, generally speaking, if you have a high-end smartphone, it's doing a lot of video and audio processing. You generally know today that the phone will get warm, and same thing. Like now you're putting something, the same thing with glasses on your head, and that'll get warm. Same exact hardware. And then generally speaking, there's a lot of things that need to be still optimized in the hardware for the headset. We also generally have to recognize what is it that we can reliably do on the headset, and what is it that we need to do somewhere else. And so my thought process around this is that ultimately I think that we're going to have to offload some of the stuff that the headset is doing to the network. And then that kind of gets into what network is going to allow me to be able to do that reliably in real time, and then that gets into 5G network technology, for instance. So you're going to have a use case where the device So the devices are both going to evolve. So they do some things really, really well, which obviously has to include battery life and not cooking your head. And then the other part is the network side, which now people think of it as a dumb pipe, but it's going to have to get a lot smarter to be able to do some of that stuff the headset was doing before, or the smartphone.
Yeah, I love the network idea. I don't know how that would exactly work, but that's great
You
if
should
you could
talk to me
offload.
afterwards, right?
Yeah, we certainly we know if you think about 5G. So I think in the midterm, what I've seen concepts, and I think Intel and Qualcomm have both kind of come out with untethered reference designs of how a headset could look like. Essentially, I think they're just an Android phone, but put in a headset. So you don't have to put an additional phone in there, so you're not using it. Creates an additional barrier, of course, because now as a consumer, you're going to buy an untethered headset, but it's not using your phone. It's kind of is your phone, but it's dedicated to VR. You could put a bigger battery in a headset, certainly, than a phone. So, I think there are some opportunities for hardware manufacturers to come up with some untethered designs that integrate larger battery life, potentially those screens, as well as something potentially even running Android that's kind of cost effective, that you could probably get into that $200-$300 range, but yet it's another it's just another headset that you're buying. But I think there's a market for that. I haven't seen it come out yet, surprisingly, because the strategy has just been try to keep it a little bit lower than sub $100, at least here in the U.S., and then leverage your cell phone. Still going to be pretty mainstream, but I think you have the option to do some of these untethered designs where you're just basically integrating the core processing power, maybe an operating system like Android, of course, and and then it just comes down to the screen cost. And look, I've been in China and I've seen, there's already 8K, 16K, screens with greater than 200-degree field of view. All right, now you're talking about you could put all those pieces together and create probably something in that $200-$300 range. That maybe that's better than buying a headset that I plug my phone into in the interim.
Yeah, I agree with the processing offloaded to the network, but in order to get the constraint to be that it has to be at the edge of the network to do the processing. Otherwise, it won't meet the latency requirement.
Yeah, I think.
It has to be close to the end.
Yeah, I think you have some very good insights there. So I generally think that whether you still offload a lot to the device, or you decide that it's going to be half device, half network that enables all these functions, I think either way you slice or dice it, because of the we all know that there's real-time requirements for VR displays today, which is why you have to use special type of displays like OLEDs versus LCD displays. If you want to have a good VR experience, you have to use an OLED display. Similarly speaking, on the network side, to be able to achieve, that 20 millisecond experience that you need from just the display side, if you want to then add the network into it, then you're going to have to do something closer to the edge, where it's close to that person, plus it's going to have to be super low latency, which is something that 5G network technology will provide.
Yeah, our sister company, Nokia Networks, is developing quite a bit in that front around mobile edge computing. So, yeah, you're definitely, I think, on the right path. But there's some solutions that are coming up in the future that will be able to solve that.
Okay. Question back there?
What about DRM guys? We're exploring with Keyboard VR. We have quite a number of subs, pretty big, large. So basically, the Netflix kind of thing, right? The app that's not. I don't know if anybody saw the Netflix app on the Samsung store. Watching movies on a big fireplace somewhere in the living room in the hills. But that is still too deep, right? And now I'm procuring immersive content, and I attended a session on DRM, and they were saying it's possible to do DRM with, leaving aside the whole thing saying that DRM is a joke. I mean, I'm talking about for 99% of the mortals, why DRM does work. What have you seen in that? Because if I can't protect the content that I'm going to be renting out, you have like people who just have Little Star that are just giving everything away for free, and nobody's going to really invest in that VR content. Where are you guys with the DRM? Have you
So if I just repeat the question just for the cameras. So the question is, what's the DRM solution for VR?
Well, I mean, I'm not a system architect, but I know a little bit about DRM, and I definitely, agree and understand its place in the world, and it's going to need to apply to VR at some point. I probably simplify it a little bit, but I believe that you can leverage the existing DRM systems that are out there. The fact that it's a spherical video doesn't really matter. It's still a file. You're protecting essentially, zeros and ones that are going through. It's an authentication scheme, however it may be, whether it's user-based or if you're using the traditional DRM schemes that are out there. So, again, the easiest route, without recreating a brand new DRM scheme is leverage the existing DRMs that are out there, integrate them into the existing playback solutions and networks that are already there, and you'll be fine. It just has to be a reason and a requirement for protecting that content, which today it's such short form that content owners are okay with having it be unprotected. But as we get more into long form content and monetizable content, I think it's just a matter of doing integration with those existing systems and what we're developing already.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to just go with Malachi's. I don't want to wear a system architect hat today, so, but generally speaking, I think what he's saying is spot on, which is that you can leverage existing.
I said that I'm not a system architect either, but what they were telling me is that the way it works is that the second you move up or down or left, that breaks the entire premise of how the DRM is constructed. So it's okay for 2D content, but the second you move and you look outside that 2D thing in front of you, so you could do the what do you call that thing again? You could do the Netflix solution where you just see something on a big IMAX screen when you put the headset on. But the second you move the left, right, up or down, it just doesn't work.
So I had the product team on at Nokia. I was previously at Kaltura, working with Iddo as well. And I can answer this question. So it is a little bit, deep in the weeds, but if we want to go there, so it is easy to encrypt over the wire using existing technologies. It's just MP4 or some, we use a slightly modified version of MP4, but you can run that through your standard encryption protocols. The issue is on the device at render time. So a bunch of the DRM protocols are implemented in iOS and Android such that when you render, you don't get access to that frame buffer in code. Because if you have access to the frame buffer in code, then you can write a piece of code that just grabs that frame buffer and writes it out to disk. And so you can copy it directly in digital format, right? So that's an integral part of DRM on the device. The problem for VR is that in order to render into the headset, you need the frame buffer. Because you have to figure out where to put it, how to warp it, where to, how to do all your, all the stuff that you need in order to, have low latency as you turn your head. So that's the core issue. And for Netflix, even though Netflix is just doing 2D, right? They're doing 2D SD. You can't do an HD stream into that Netflix player on Gear VR because there's no DRM pipeline that you can use for the VR renderer. Because if you're using HD on Netflix, the studios require Netflix to use this DRM pathway that's embedded on the client side. You can't do it for VR. That's why they have to show you an SD feed inside that virtual room. So it's a problem. There's no easy technical solution. So it's going to have to get worked out over the next few years. I mean, right now the market is small enough that it's not like Disney thinks, their stock price is going to change if somebody leaks the latest, Star Wars 2-minute long behind-the-scenes video, right? But over time, as this stuff becomes more valuable, we are going to need to solve the problem.
Yeah. I guess I'd just add on to that very excellent answer generally speaking, we have to, kind of then look to the model. So, I mean, generally, we're now looking at in these 360 players you have the frame buffer first, and now, but at the same time, you have that video player functionality then where you're presenting, a specific piece of that 360 video or CGI content to the user. So you basically have a video player sitting on top of some sort of 3D rendering, engine code, so to speak. And, that's maybe a solution. We'll solve it by taking existing concepts that we have with, that we're already doing for DRM today. And then we'll probably have to, either adapt that DRM to, this way of doing 3D, or we're going to have to look at, how we do DRM in the gaming world, and then adapt some of that towards how we do this for 360 and VR CGI content, where it's a more interactive experience.
And the studios pay people millions of dollars every year to figure this out, so I'm sure they'll figure it out, and then they'll tell us what to do, and then we'll say, well, that's not going to work, and then we'll talk back and forth, and then we'll figure it out, and then we'll implement it. It's kind of how it works.
It's great. Great. Thanks for speaking there. Go ahead.
Hi, Mark goes we're launching a marketing campaign with VR in June.
Okay.
Live streaming of concerts specifically. I've seen the bill for CDM, the bill that is coming. It's 3-4-fold of what you regularly would do with just SD, right? Or HD even. OTT players already have issued with 4K to monetize this. How will this ever work with VR? I mean, this is a marketing campaign, so it's marketing dollars, not an issue.
Well,
but if you look at monetizational content,
thanks for the question, Mark. If I jump in first on this one, because we actually just announced something at NAB that's directly related to this. So hopefully you're using Ozo. If not, for live stream. But we just implemented what we're calling Ozo Deliver, which is essentially a viewport adaptive streaming. So you're really only getting the full res here, and then low res all around. So that's going to cut your bill. I don't know what the exact statistics are, but it's certainly going to cut your streaming bill significantly. So we already have developed the solution, or at least a start of that solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the ability to just stream what the user is looking at, or the ability to stream just the part that they're looking at very high quality, and then the periphery at lower quality. I think that's one solution to bring down the bill, so to speak. The other piece of it is just being a little bit clever with how you actually do some of the encoding to begin with, the adaptive encoding. Generally speaking, one of the things that that was my experience when we were working on an environment, coming at it from a cellular carrier point of view, was how a lot of people are looking at delivering that 360 VR content with the most megabits possible, and then we were our natural question was like, why is somebody going to do this over a cellular connection, especially because we're generally also cognizant of like how much data usage would be involved with that, and so then we were like, well, we need to be able to deliver a good quality experience over whether it's Wi-Fi or cellular, but we have to do it in a smarter way. And so then, generally speaking, there's a lot of nifty things that you can do with existing encoder systems to try and reduce the bit rate, but still generally make the quality of the video look reasonably good, and or good enough. And that in the case of when we were looking at delivering to Gear VR or Daydream headsets, that's perfectly fine. And then if you have something like the Vive or the Oculus, where you're probably connected to a high-speed cable or fiber connection, then go crazy.
HEVC, H.265. I mean, all there's hopefully all that's happening. We should talk after, make sure you got the right solution in place.
Yeah. Well, with that, I do want to say we're out of time, but I do want to thank you guys for sitting on the panel and really providing your insights, and certainly stick around and ask questions if you do have more questions. But thanks again, guys.
Thank you so much, Michael.
It was a pleasure.